Hello, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I am a certified yoga teacher, ordained minister, amongst other things. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about gratitude, or maybe the opposite of gratitude, which in my perspective is taking things for granted. And this is a part of what I'm sharing about the things that I've really seen coming out of my own dark night of the soul. So again, if you listen to my last talk, I talked a little bit about the dark night. And the way I'm using the term here, which is a little different than, say, a teacher like Eckhart Tolle uses it. And it's not about right or wrong, but the way I'm using it is when someone has woken up spiritually, had a spiritual awakening, and they felt connected to Source, to God, to Spirit, and then they feel disconnected again. When we're just beginning on our awakening, this can happen a lot, very fast, and this is sometimes called oscillation. And then, in my experience, it slows down or even seems to stop. And yet, in my experience, lately, I've seen that it maybe doesn't completely ever go away completely. I don't know, to be honest with you, but I experienced this dark night, this sort of loss. And there's some other mystics, great mystics, who talk about it. That's how the term originally was coined. It's somebody who feels connected with God, and then they all of a sudden feel disconnected, and they call that a dark night of the soul. So before I do get into it too much, I want to thank everyone who likes, subscribes, shares, comments on YouTube. That really does help the channel out. And I especially want to thank those who make a financial contribution on Patreon that allows me to approach this as part of my work. Unfortunately, I am a small fry, so I don't have the resources or the extra time or money to be able to buy camera equipment and take time out of my day to make these videos without some sort of financial support. So it's really not a business I'm trying to run. I'm really not interested in marketing and having a huge following unless that happens organically. So my view on all of this is I'm trying to share something that I hope will be of value to you, to help you out. And then if you feel inclined, inspired, called to, you can help support me in that work. And sometimes it might not even be for yourself. It might be you see the value and you want to help others on their journey. So you're supporting me and helping that. All the content that I make pretty much is free, even on Patreon. It's all just there, accessible to everybody. The classes, the online classes I teach over there. If you want to do some online classes with me, check those out. The only places where I don't have things that are free are places where there are other parties involved. So if there are yoga studios, if I teach at a yoga studio, that has to be a paid class because there's a yoga studio that is a for-profit business, and same with retreats and things like this. But the things that I'm doing on my own, online, I just basically try and make all of that freely accessible to the public, and then you can decide whether you're getting value or not. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's look at the subject for today, which is sort of the opposite of gratitude. And again, this is just something I've noticed has really been nourishing my heart as I come out of the dark night. And what I found is the ego is basically a take it for granted machine, if you will. So if you will observe in your own experience, basically what happens is the ego tells us that if we get something outside of ourselves, a partner, a job, a fancy trip, a new possession, that we will fill a hole or a gap in ourselves, and we will feel then happy and fulfilled. And when you're really young, you might actually believe this. I think most people, as they get older, they begin to kind of see through it, and they know that the best they're going to get is a temporary sort of fix. So if they get a new car, they're going to feel happy for a few days, and then it's going to wear off. A few days, few weeks, few months, even if it's a few years. It's just not a very lasting happiness. And I think most people who have some level of self-awareness, they're just aware of that. That's the case. I don't think it requires a great deal of spiritual awareness to get to that point. Having said that, there are people who are just not aware of that. They honestly do think that if they get X, then they will somehow feel fulfilled, and they think that fulfillment is going to last. But those who have been on this path a while, they know it's not going to last. So the ego, basically, it's constantly trying to acquire things, and then the minute it acquires them, it basically takes them for granted. So I know in my own life, I've had this experience where maybe I fell in love or in lust or whatever it is. I had eyes for somebody, and I really thought that this person would fulfill me and they would complete me and complete my life. And all I needed to do was get in a relationship with this person. And then when it happened, there might have been a period of celebration, of feeling like, yes, I got what I wanted. But pretty quickly, that wore off. And I was just back to my baseline, whatever my baseline was. And in those parts of my life, my baseline was not very high, admittedly so. Now it is much higher, and that's part of what makes the dark night so difficult, is you're used to being up here, maybe for months, years, decades even, and then all of a sudden you are below that baseline, and you know that you could be living up here. So the ego is, for lack of a better way of putting it, in my experience, it's a taking for granted machine. It basically will take whatever it is in your life. So if you're young and healthy, it will take that youthfulness and that health for granted, and instead will identify things that it will tell you that you need. Now, the spiritual truth is, and I don't want to argue this today, and some people may not accept this, but the spiritual truth is you're already complete as you are. Spirit, if you're identified with spirit, spirit is complete. Spirit, there's no hole or lack or anything in spirit. Spirit is exactly what it needs to be. So it's only when we're identified as a small self, as the egoic self, that we then can believe the ego with its narrative of you lack this, you lack that, you lack love, you need a partner, you need this car, you need this job, you need success, you need fame, whatever it might be. And then what you'll find, if you're paying attention, is the minute you get one of those things, again, there might be a party, there might be a little celebration, there might be a feeling of relief, a sort of temporary feeling of relief. But I think what you'll find is it doesn't last very long. You may already have other things on the table that you feel that you need, or in short order, the ego identifies things that it says you are lacking. And now that you have this thing, you now need something else. So again, if you are a little later in years in your life, you might look back at your youth and say, wow, I would give anything to have my youth back, the health, the beauty, the potential I had. I took that for granted. I wish I had that now. But whatever health you're in now, chances are, if you were on your deathbed with some form of terminal illness, let's just take cancer for an example, and let's say you were given a very short time to live, you might look back on your state that you're in now, and you might be envious of this state, right? From a state of being on your deathbed with cancer, you might say, oh my God, I took it for granted. I wish that I just enjoyed the fact that I could go out and enjoy the sun. Now I'm connected up to all these machines that are breathing for me or managing my blood, and I can't get out of this bed, and I'm so sick, and I only have a very short time left to live. So this shows us that something in one instance that we can take for granted in a different context becomes very, very valuable. Another example of this is just drinking water, clean drinking water that won't make you sick. If you are watching this video, chances are, there's no guarantee, but chances are you're living in a place where you have clean drinking water. It will not make you sick if you drink this water. And there are lots of places in the world where that's not the case. There's water that you can drink that might make you very, very sick. It's contaminated. It's, even poisonous, slowly kind of poisoning you. So if we were to take away your clean drinking water, very quickly you might begin to appreciate having it. Toilet paper during the pandemic was a big deal, right? Something as simple as just being able to go to the bathroom in the way that you learned from childhood, being able to do the ritual that you've always done, all of a sudden that becomes something that you can't take for granted. So what I've found personally is, as I've come out of the dark night of the soul, is if I just pause for a moment and really appreciate, have gratitude for the simple things like this walk that I'm on now. The fact that my body and my legs function well enough to be able to do this is a miracle. It really, truly is. But because most of us can walk, most of us take walking for granted. The fact that I'm able to talk as a yoga teacher, one of my most valuable assets is my voice. Also as a kirtan artist, as someone who helps facilitate chanting. If I can't sing, if I can't project my voice, then that is a big deal. And I've had a period before where I got an infection and I completely lost my voice. So having a voice that I can talk to you with, that I can communicate with you with, very valuable. This camera earlier, well, I think it was towards the end of last year, the camera that I had been using up to that point, it broke. And so I had to replace it with this one. And it took a long time for this camera to come. And so, my videos were getting shorter and shorter because the battery was dying on the camera that I had. And I looked into it. It really was not financially smart to replace that battery. There was no easy way to do it. So replacing the whole camera was really the answer. But it took a long time to get the new camera. So again, the camera that I'm speaking to you on, the computer you're watching this on, or the phone that you're watching this on, there's so much that we could be grateful for. And again, it's really irrespective of the situation we find ourselves in. Whatever it is you feel like you're lacking, you could be lacking more, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? You could stub your toe today and then be walking around with a limp, and then you just wish that your toe were back to healthy again. Where I found it showing up for me is in very simple things like making a cup of tea. I really enjoy my tea, I'll admit. It's something that brings me quite a bit of joy, that ritual of having a cup of tea. And I like good loose leaf tea, so I usually will buy loose leaf tea that's grown, organic tea by artisans, and this tea comes from all around the world. And what a miracle it is for me to be able to acquire and purchase these teas from all around the world and enjoy them in the comfort of my home. Again, I have clean water to drink. I have apparatus to heat the water up on. And it really is quite miraculous when you think about it. But the fact of the matter is, most of us don't stop to think about it. And when I was in my dark night, even though I might intellectually think about this, it was hard to let go of the pain. And this is what we call Velcro. It's like you get stuck to certain thoughts or certain emotions. And the process of letting go of that, I've spoke quite a bit about. For me, the main process was surrendering to feeling the emotions completely when I was ready. So I do think there was a period that I went through where it was so raw and so intense that I just needed to sort of keep myself busy for a little while. But then once things had settled down enough, then I could turn into the sensations in a meditative state and invite them in and allow them. And more than any other process, that really has helped me digest and assimilate those energies. And then, as that has happened, the thing that has really sparked a lot of joy and brought a lot of joy back for me is, again, just noticing the small things. The tea, having a roof over my head, being able to turn a faucet and have hot water for a shower, being able to walk out of my home and put down some money and have a hot meal served to me. There's really too many miracles for us to really fathom. And again, the way most of us think about it is we just simply take it for granted. In fact, I live a pretty humble life. And so from many people's perspective in the West, they might look at my life and say, well, you know, you don't really have much to be grateful for. Like you don't own your own home. You don't have a nice insurance policy. There's lots of things that I do without. And so it's very easy to compare me with someone who is more financially successful and say, oh, well, you know, you're really lacking. And believe me, my brain can go there. I can have those thoughts. But if you've been with me for a while, you understand that just because we have a thought, it doesn't mean we need to believe it. And it doesn't mean it's actually good for us to believe it. In fact, one of the main teachings of a teacher I really like named Byron Katie is one of her main narratives that she gives is she realized when she had her awakening that when she believed her thoughts, she suffered. And when she questioned her thoughts, the suffering stopped. So there you have it. We can just believe every thought that pops into our head, and then we start suffering. Or we can question the thoughts and see how the opposite of the thought can be as true or even more true than the thought that popped up for us. And in that, we begin to free ourselves from that. So again, there are many, many teachings, techniques out there to free us from that Velcro. And it's an important step. For me, again, the questioning of the thoughts wasn't really what I needed in my dark night. What I really needed was to turn into the emotions and sensations that were arising in my body because I already knew the thoughts weren't true, for lack of a better way of putting it. But because that emotional energy was so strong, it almost forced a certain thought or narrative. It made that thought or narrative really feel like it was really true, even though it wasn't. So that phase or stage is one thing. But what I'm sharing with you today, I think, is something that is enriching even if we are not in a dark night of the soul. And I hope that you are not. In fact, as I've already sort of alluded to, if you're in a dark night, this particular technique may not be that helpful, because even though you know that you should be grateful, the feeling may not arise, right? You can think, oh, this tea comes from across the world and it's a miracle that it's here, but it won't feel true. And this is an important point, that feeling, that resonance that we want. And it may not for you. If you are not awake, if you are in a dark night, if you are in certain situations, then this practice may not be that helpful. But if you're in the right spot, this practice really does so much to spark joy and appreciation and a feeling of gratitude. I would say this probably is a kind of gratitude practice, but as I said, it's almost the opposite of what the ego is. The ego is just constantly trying to take things for granted, and what you're doing is you're beating the ego at its own game. You're taking away this tool that it's using to create that sense of separation. So it's constantly telling you that you lack something. It's constantly telling you that you need something. It's constantly telling you you don't have enough. And you're sort of turning that around and saying no. And in that, you are disempowering the ego. Why would you want to disempower the ego? Because the ego is the source of your suffering, period, full stop. It's as clear as that. A lot of people want to believe that the ego is their friend, it's their pal, it's protecting them. That's not my experience. It's not the experience of teachers like Eckhart Tolle. So again, other teachers might tell you different, and that's fine. But for me, the ego is not your pal. It's not your buddy. Maybe you have to have one. Maybe you can't get rid of it. I don't know the answers to those questions. But generally, I've found the more we disempower the ego, the more joy we have. Another place where I find this coming up is in whatever it is that we do have. So for instance, I run this YouTube channel and I have a Patreon page, and it's rather modest. So there are creators who have millions of followers, or even, more than that. And there are people on Patreon who are making their whole living just from running their Patreon page. I'm nowhere close to any of that, okay? So again, I could listen to my ego and say, I don't have enough followers. There aren't enough views on this video. I'm not making enough on Patreon. I need to market. I need to do all these different things. Or when I teach class, I can say, oh, there aren't enough people here. And those thoughts do arise. Those thoughts do arise. But what I've been doing lately that really has been, again, bringing me a lot of peace and joy is just saying thank you for what is there. So if this video gets 3 views, thank you. There were 3 people who were willing to watch click on and watch this video. That's a miracle. Like, what a great thing. Why would I take it for granted or assume that more people should be interested, right? It's so easy for us to go there again. Or if our paycheck isn't as big as we want, getting upset about that instead of being grateful for what is there. So in a sense, we really aren't owed anything, and everything that we have is a gift. So the reality is we can be grateful for anything that we have, even if everything isn't the way we want it to be. So I know I have places in my life that personally I would love to change. I would love to see them different than they are. But focusing on that, I find just brings me suffering. And when I focus on what I do have, right, the gratitude for what I do have, when I focus on that, I find more peace, more joy, and I find myself more motivated and more energetic and more creative to actually do the things that might get me the outcomes that I feel I lack, right? To produce, if I feel like I lack money, to produce money. If I feel like I lack love, to draw love toward me. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And as always, I hope this was helpful for you. This comes again very much from my own personal experience, and I'm just trying to share. So if you did get value, please like, subscribe, comment, share if you're on YouTube. And if you feel inspired, if you feel called to, check out the Patreon page. There are a few things there that I can't post here on YouTube. You might enjoy those things. And if you feel inclined, you can make a monthly contribution. You can also make one-time contributions at the links below, PayPal, Venmo. Some people prefer to contribute that way. I really do appreciate all the support. It makes this work possible, this online aspect of the teaching. Well, that's it for today. Until next time, namaste, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.